The virtual CISO moment is brought to you by vCISO Services, a leading provider of quality and experienced virtual chief information security officers for small and mid-sized businesses. Check them out at vcisoservices.com. Hi, I'm Greg Schaefer, and welcome to the virtual CISO moment. Adam Bricker joins us. He is the founder of ePower Learning. Adam, thank you so much for coming on today.
It's great to be here, Greg. Thanks. This is a pleasure for me. Share the journey.
Oh, definitely for me too. I'd like to hear about your journey. I know I've read some of your stuff on LinkedIn. I know you've done work with Carolina Cyber Center. Definitely want to dig into that a little bit. But how did you get started in IT, and how did you come to the point of being the founder of a company, and what does it mean to be an entrepreneur in IT?
Well, yeah, I've had this really eclectic career. I started off going to college to be an architect, but before my first day, I was transferred over to the aerospace engineering department. I didn't,
Oh,
frankly, think I was smart enough for that, but that's for a whole nother story. And I've always loved aerospace, and so I get started as an aerospace engineer and completely out of my depth going to college because went to high school in a small town that did not prepare me for college. But by the time left college, I was like second or third in my class, and I was lucky enough to get this awesome job at General Dynamics in San Diego.
uh-huh.
And so I left Texas to go to San Diego and got to work on the Tomahawk cruise missile. Then I got to work on some highly classified cruise missiles, hypersonic cruise missiles, air breathing ones, and missiles. And as I tell people, as a young buck getting to blow stuff up in the desert and bury it so Russian satellites can't find it, it just doesn't get much better than that. But
That's awesome. And I was in the
it's fun.
desert at that time with Desert Storm, where Tomahawks
Oh,
definitely were very important. So thank you.
yeah, well, I was lucky enough to be in the bunker when we launched them and the first ones. And we were knowing how complicated they are was kind of surprising they worked as well as they did, but as you know, they worked exceptionally well.
Absolutely, yeah.
But after about and I was lucky enough when I went to college that software programming was considered a second language. So I took a few programming classes in college. So after getting out of college, after about 5, 6 years into my IT career, after into my aerospace engineering career, a lot of the problems we were trying to solve, we couldn't solve with wind tunnels and flight tests. It was too expensive. And so I was lucky enough to be on NASA was doing the leading edge work, and I was just following to use some of the computational fluid dynamics and other algorithms and big supercomputers coming along at the time to simulate problems in aerospace. So I
Hmm.
started writing a lot of software and realized I actually thought I was pretty good at writing software. Later on, I found out I wasn't quite as good as I thought I was. But I was lucky enough to get on the Lockheed. Our part of General Dynamics was bought by Lockheed, so I get on the Lockheed Leadership and Executive Development Program, and got to travel and work around the United States on their development program and procurement and software and business development and working inside the Beltway in Washington and the Pentagon and stuff. But during the downturn in the 90s, and I just wanted to do something different, I was fortunate enough to do a little bit of consulting work and go work for Southwest Airlines. And I became an employee of Southwest Airlines, and I helped start their procurement department. So you see, it's just weird. Like, what does an aerospace engineer know about procurement? Well, not a lot, but I learned quickly. And after turning around the procurement department, and I have a snarky sense of humor, so we called ourselves the PIGs, the Procurement Process Improvement Group. And we saved them like $30 million a year. And back in the 90s and aughts, as we say, that was a lot of money. It still is, of course.
Mm.
And so then I was asked to help turn around the IT department there. And so I became the director of information systems, and we built some big bad systems, and just a wonderful, wonderful team. But there was lots of bloody hard work to kind of turn around. Didn't have a good culture inside and lots of turnover relative to the rest of the airline. So I won a few awards, and then I had an opportunity to go do global work and the big restaurant company Yum, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, KFC guys, to
Mm.
work in 200 countries and big systems running restaurants. But maybe for another time I can talk about one of the big failures I had in my career, and that was one of them. Taking that job and what I did there, I wish I had just done that better.
Uh-huh.
But I reflected on it, had to do with technical architecture and stuff. But so now I'm living back in Southern California. I'm loving life. And for a variety of personal reasons, decided I was going to strike out on my own again and start a little consulting company that then became bought and became part of KPMG, which then became a bigger consulting company. And I rose up the ranks to be global executive director of the complex industrial manufacturing consulting practice. And now we're building systems, implementing packages, but also doing a lot of process improvement, performance work.
Hmm.
And so by now, I was not on my best day, smart enough to see this, but I had a background in theoretical work, math, physics, I had a background in application, actually building missiles and software and stuff that people had to use. Now I've worked in 20 or 30 countries and helped develop my consulting chops.
Hmm.
The ability to get things done by influencing others and creating visions and plans on a bigger scale. But at about that time, um, I had no real valid reason why I was making more money than I ever thought I was going to make. I never got super rich, but I was really blessed and wonderful family and great kids living in Southern California. And there's my wife walking in the background there. And I had sort of like this existential crisis, and a friend of mine approached me because I was just angry every day, not to or at work, but at night I'd go home going, what am I doing? And I got a call from a friend of mine saying, "Hey, Adam, I was contacted by a recruiter at World Vision, and they were looking for a chief information officer and wanted to know if you'd be interested." And I was like, "Yes, I am." And then I'm like, "I don't even know who World Vision is." So I did what any good IT pinhead would do. I went to the internet the next morning and looked it up and said, "Oh, it's this giant Christian humanitarian aid agency that I frankly had never heard of." Embarrassing
Uh-huh.
to say. I'd always been active in my church and stuff, but I didn't know. But I went out and I met the president, a guy named Dean Hirsch, and to make a long story short, he looked at me piercingly and he said, "Adam, it's clear you've been successful, but do you want to be significant?" And I felt pretty convicted by that. So, you leave the big corporate world and the nice car and the nice house and traveling and traipsing around the world. And I went to work for this nonprofit as their head of IT, and at the time, like 20 staff. But over the next 5 or 6 years, we built it up to 800 or 900 staff working around the world in almost 100 countries. And we did microfinance systems and supply chain systems and finance systems. But one of the great joys was I also founded this thing called the Innovation for Development within World Vision, where I got to traipse around the world and find entrepreneurs and help them be successful. Frankly, I feel like I won the birth lottery 3 different times. One, I was just born in our great country.
Uh-huh.
And for all the things we think are ills, this is still a great, wonderful country
Absolutely.
which I feel enormously indebted for virtually everything that I've been able to be a part of in this life. The second one, I was born to parents of means. They weren't, my dad went on to become pretty successful in life, but I mean, they spoke well, and I wasn't worried about where the next meal was coming from, and they provided an education for me, and so I, won the, as Warren Buffett says, the womb lottery. And then the third one was to to know Christ as my Lord and Savior, and to say I get a chance to do that as a profession, as a vocation, and to travel around the world and actually get paid doing it. I'm like, it just doesn't get any better than that. As Again, as much as blowing stuff up in the desert was fun.
Yeah.
Now, by an accident of birth, I have access to resources that I could apply to people in India and Pakistan and Bangladesh and wherever and help lift them out of poverty. So did that for a while. Then I struck out on my own again to take a Christ-oriented morals and ethics program and bring it into primary schools. And one of my joke that God has a sense of humor because I'm not an educator. I don't speak Spanish, but this thing took off in Latin America with our partner called Mission Generation. So that was great fun to be a part of. Come back to the States. By now, I've lived and worked in 65 countries, I think, at the time, and just friends all over the world and just loving it. And so then I never viewed myself as a consultant, but I started getting asked all the time by Compassion Church, the big Christian ministry there, Saddleback Church, Rick Warren's organization, and then I did a startup in medical oncology. I was the chief informatics officer there. So we mined oncology data from 1,000 oncologists across the United States, looked for better ways to treat cancer, and then sold that business off. And now I'm doing all these really weird things a long way from developing weapons of mass destruction at this point.
Yeah.
And then I did a stint as the head of IT and head of security at a mining company called Westmoreland Mining. But I tell you that to kind of back up and say my first real experience in cybersecurity was at World Vision when we would put servers up in Sudan or Costa Rica or something like that, and they would just get riddled with viruses really quickly. This is back in 2006, 2007. And sad to say, we had staff killed almost every year because their cybersecurity or their privacy was not protected. They would find out we had women working in Afghanistan. They would find out rural healthcare workers in Pakistan were just, I mean, these could be Muslim staff distributing, antiretroviral drugs or inoculations to their own communities, and they would be killed for it because they would find out that we somehow were involved, providing money or training or whatever. And I just started to obsess about that, as you can, as you imagine. And then I embarrassingly realized how much I did not know. When I tell you, when I told you the story about building systems at Southwest Airlines deployment, I didn't have the lens of IT and cybersecurity in mind when we did that. And we were doing web-based procurement for airline tickets. And, we had super secret meetings in a mile underground in the big data center where the airline reservation system was hosted. And I thought about physical protection and, privacy to a degree that was law, but I wasn't thinking about cybersecurity. So then I'm at this mining company where we were attacked by the Chinese. We were as a nation state. We also got attacked by Nigerian, business email compromise. And by now I'm really embarrassed at how much I don't know and how much I need to know.
Mhm.
And so I just threw myself into it, starting about 6 or 7 years ago. Threw myself into studying almost every day, certainly every week, reading, going to conferences, taking classes, on and on and on. So now I'm like, well, I guess somebody up there had a plan and saw things in me I didn't. So now about 3 years ago, I get an opportunity. A friend of mine that I'd known in South Carolina for 20 years, who I'd helped recruit other executives for his recruiting business. He calls me up when I'm in the middle of Saskatchewan on a climbing trip and a mountaineering trip, and he says, "Hey, Adam, I got this role that I think you'd be good for. I got this real small Christian college here in Western North Carolina, and they want somebody to come here and build this thing called the Carolina Cyber Center, and try and make it as another strategic resource for the college." And I was like, how brain damaged you'd have to be to want to do that? I mean, the college only had 650 students or something at the time, and I'd never heard of World Vision. I'd never heard of Monterey College,
Right.
and but God just would not let it off my heart. And so I started obsessing about that. And I was like, okay, well, if this is what I'm called to go do, and I'm one of those that believes God doesn't promise you success. He just calls you to be faithful in
Exactly.
service to others. And that's what our mission is, just to serve others. And I mentioned that I was on this mountaineering trip because I'm living out of my truck for 4 or 5 months with my dog. I had lots of time to think as I'm climbing and driving and hunting and fishing around Canada and Western US. And it just kept dawning on me that in my first job, my mission was to help stop the Cold War through this weapon called the Advanced Cruise Missile. Southwest had a mission to get as many people to fly, have as a lot of fun flying as possible. And of course, World Vision trying to lift people out of poverty. And I'm like, okay, I get it. That is the purpose of life, is to find your calling, believe you are there, which only you can do, and to serve other people. And so I said, God, I guess this is what I'm supposed to do next. So kicking and screaming, myself and my wife, because we're living in a nice place in Colorado and we loved it. We came out here, and through the great work of the people at Monterey College, the wonderful people at the state of North Carolina and others, we won grants from the Department of Labor, the NSA, others to help fund this thing called the Carolina Cyber Center, which was ostensibly to do three things. One, to bring awareness to the challenges and the opportunity in cybersecurity. If you're a small and medium businesses, who do you go to? Who can you trust to give you reasonable and prudent advice on what to do? Because it can certainly be overwhelming. The second one is to build the talent in not in a college or university setting, but build it through a set of academies to help develop the next generation of cybersecurity professionals. And the third one is to provide services to local, and that might be within 100 or 200 miles, services to local businesses, assessments of cybersecurity. How do they get compliant to go win government contracts? How do they do threat hunting? How do they secure their information and also protect the privacy of their people and the customer data that they have? So we start doing those three things. And between what the college directly was able to raise and what Carolina Cyber Center was able to raise, and I think it was north of $40 million within 2.5 years.
Wow.
And like I said, it's hard to imagine we could have been more blessed, especially by the great leaders at the state of North Carolina and I've worked in a lot of states across the United States, but the thought leaders from Maria Thompson when she was the chief risk officer to now Rob Main, state's chief risk officer, to Senator Tillis, to Representative Sain and others, their vision for what this state could and should be is absolutely leading class. It is up there with the top 10 states in the United States for how they think about empowering the people and securing systems. And just try to create the best resources for the people of the state. I mean, I met with these people dozens and dozens of times,
Hmm.
and there was never a sense, not once was there a sense of self-aggrandizement. I remember sitting in senator's office in Washington, D.C., and it was all about what can we do for the people of North Carolina? What can we do for our great nation? Which, being a jaundiced, and I'm not a politician or something, I found refreshing.
Yes.
Anyway, I've talked a lot, Greg. I hope that helps kind of paint the picture to what
No,
brought me here.
that
Thanks.
that is great, and I want to thank you so much for sharing the faith aspect of it, and I can identify so much with that, um, and I'm very public about this, and that I was comfortable in corporate as CISO for a bank here in Nashville, Tennessee, and I got uh, a calling basically. Now I had been doing consulting, a little bit of virtual CISO stuff on the side, nothing major, but got the little whisper in my ear. It's like, Greg, you're doing great with your talents, but you could be doing more. Kind of like what you were saying. Do you want to be significant? Do you want to make a difference?
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I never, I that's not my DNA. And but I made the leap of faith. And that sort of developed to something else that you were talking about, which I think is hugely important, not only in cyber, but just in general, is that it's the mantra by which I live by and by which my little firm lives by. And that is that if you have a heart of a servant, you're always going to be successful because of where you put your value. And you're right, everything is about serving. Um, so I appreciate that. And just a little bit of background too about how actually I got involved with
Mm.
Montreat is that um, I actually have family in Western North Carolina, and a few years
Oh,
ago,
nice.
I was looking for a cyber conference that I could go to, and sort of like right off the trip. So, but I went, and I was just like, I really didn't know anything about um, Montreat or Black Mountain, and I didn't know anything about that. I didn't know that Billy Graham was from there. I didn't know
Yeah.
anything about the history, but we ended up sponsoring, having a table there, and I was just very amazed by the attitude of wanting to learn. Yes, it was small, the little conference they have there, but and I need to plug that right now because that
Yeah.
is going to
Retreat.
be this week. Retreat is going to be this week on Friday, the 23rd, if I'm remembering
That's
correctly,
right.
and we're actually going to be down there recording a few episodes of hopefully video of the virtual CISO moment because just it could be anybody, it could be students there. I just love to hear their stories. So Carolina Cyber Center, I know that you have since left from there, but I'm fascinated by it, and what is what has been some of the successes that you found through there when you were with them up until early this year?
It's a great question, and I love the reflection of what is success, and the opposite of that is what is failure. So I outlined like the three areas of what I deem as success in life, and failure is anytime you don't pick yourself up off the mat and learn and move forward and keep asking yourself this important question: what's the gift I want to give my future self?
Hmm.
What's we're sacrificing today to be the gift I want to give my future self? So I say that to say, as proud as I am of lots of different things that the team at Carolina Cyber Center was able to accomplish and still are, and going into levels beyond what I could have done, is we were able to work with and when I say youth, my age, anybody under 50 I consider youth. We had students as young as 17, as old as 63.
Wow.
And while are ostensibly our role, I call it gracious manipulation. Our goal was to train you in cybersecurity so you could go get a job and make money. Awesome. Good goal. But we realized unless you are a person of character, unless you understand what that means, you have decided that this is the gift you want to give your future self, you are willing to sacrifice for it, all that entails, you are not going to be successful. You will drift back into being just another sheep in this world, or go back on this low income housing and taking uh, you know subsidies from the government and living off other people. And
Hmm.
I feel our first moral responsibility as citizens is to be able to take care of ourselves.
Yes, yes.
So, and I believe you help somebody else by helping affirm who and through and to whom they could become, not
Hmm.
giving them a hand out, but giving a hand up. So it's deeper than that. So I say all that, of course, to say this. We developed 9-month academies. These are not easy. We came along with a set of teaching, coaching, and life mentoring to help them become what they could become. We ran programs in inner-city Charlotte, inner-city Atlanta, virtual programs across the Western North Carolina and the States. And probably about 200 students went through the program during my tenure there, and every single one of them got a job at or above prevailing wages in their profession of IT or cybersecurity. Or they may have chosen to go on to get a master's or something. But
Hmm.
so these are inner city young men and women in Atlanta, for example. I would drive down to Atlanta every Thursday morning, get up at 3:30 in the morning and drive down there and teach all day and come back late at night. And I was exhausted, but it was the highlight of my week to work with young men and women. And as you know, as the white guy that drives in there, this is like 60% of all murders in Atlanta happen within a mile of where we taught these classes.
Wow.
Because Jesus didn't do his work behind a pulpit, and I'm no Jesus. I'm like as big a fallen, failed sinner as there is out there. But God, to go down and to work with these young men and women, help them become all they could become, and then watch some guy who he came into the interview carrying a weapon, not concealed. I mean, visible 45 caliber, and he comes and he's this big guy who could squash me like a twig, and now he gets a job making $80,000 a year working for a premier Fortune 500 company in Atlanta 9 months later. I just thought it was awesome. So yes, the Carolina Cyber Center is now providing services in Western North Carolina, has done these outreach. We probably wrote 100 different um, messages throughout the weeks to deliver to the local communities. But taking young men and women and converting their life and doing so in a program which is consistent with the mission of Monterey College, that to me was the highlight.
And
That
I
was the
think
highlight.
you've kind of answered the question that I usually ask, and we are a little bit short on time. So, but as far as like the biggest threat out there for small mid-sized businesses, it sounds like that there's two there. One is, at least as far as you would say, is like awareness, and the other one is quality character resources to help provide that security. Is that a fair assessment?
I think it's a really good place for them to start. Yes.
Mhm.
Sometimes we don't know who we can trust. And cybersecurity is just like lots of insurance, because sometimes that's the way they view it. Like, I'm insuring this away. Well, it's not just the defenses, it's also the resilience. What would you do if something bad were to happen in your business? So CISA, the infrastructure security agent, they have resources that are free to small and medium business, and they get better all the time. Under
Yeah, they do.
Jennifer Easley, they get better all the time. She is a gift to this nation, by the way. I've met her a few times. And the state's chief risk officer now, Rob Main, at the state of North Carolina level, they have some free resources for small and medium business. The Carolina Cyber Center has some tools and does assessments and very, very low cost services here for those. But if I had to summarize the biggest risks to a small business, one of which is their mental model, the way they think about cybersecurity might be along the lines of, I don't have anything they want. I'm a small person. I'm not going to be targeted by this. It's just not that big a deal. And you could not be more wrong. Over the last couple of years, small and medium businesses now are more attacked than larger businesses.
Yep.
And it's not that they need to be targeted. They can sometimes, the bad guys, the nefarious actors, can do what they call spray and pray. They just launch these things out across the internet looking for vulnerable points.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I take a bunch of, small marbles and throw them at your house. The fact that it went through that upper window, I wasn't aiming for the window. I was just throwing in that direction, but now something got through. So then
Right.
they will exploit it. So that's the first mental model. The second one is most small companies are not going to have the resources to be able to protect themselves and become resilient. And I've worked not quite as deep across the United States as I have here in North Carolina, but North Carolina is blessed with a number of smaller firms who, on a very cost-effective basis, can provide those services to the small business, and they're not prohibitively expensive anymore. Yes, they're expensive, but you're not going to be able to hire a cybersecurity professional as a small firm where you have 50 employees. You're not, nor should you need to. But you can go get a virtual chief information security officer with a virtual set of services that will defend you, protect you, but they'll also help if something bad happens to mitigate the damage. And so one of which is, say, small businesses, it's not that you're targeted, but you are being attacked. And when, it's not just if they get through, but when. And going to have wish you had done the work now to create your insurance policy, finding a firm, a set of people that you can trust, and leveraging them. And by the way, the insider threat now is almost as big as the outside threat. They take your data, they take your information. I think just in the last 3 years, I think 4 or 5 people in the state of North Carolina have been caught and convicted for insider threats to their
Hmm.
own company. So
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
anyway, yeah.
Well, listen, we could talk about this for hours.
Oh,
And
thanks, Greg.
unfortunately, we have run out of time. But Adam, I so much appreciate you taking the time to join us today. It was an absolutely fabulous conversation and very,
Yeah,
very
thank you.
interesting and inspiring story.
Thank you, and wishing you and your listeners the very best.
Okay, and everybody stay secure.